Do artists need to stop releasing alternate covers? Would Taylor Swift's Imperial era have happened if the pandemic had never happened? And is Lana Del Rey boring? These are all questions that I am going to address in this week's episode of The Pop Pod as we look at some of your controversial opinions. I am Sam, also known as Pop Sam Cam, and this is The Pop Pod. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode. Apologies for this episode being a day late. Usually, or at the moment, we are dropping on a Tuesday and a Friday, definitely, sometimes with a cheeky Thursday episode thrown in. But I was moving homes yesterday, so I had to forgo yesterday's episode and move it to today. It's also why I'm holding the microphone like I am some kind of like 60s Motown singer without a stand or anything. I still don't have all my equipment, but I am working the best I can to get you the Pop Pod today. This is actually one of my favorite episodes to do, where I talk about your controversial opinions that you have dropped to me either on Discord or on Instagram. There are many things covered today. We've got lots of Taylor Swift questions, lots of Lana Del Rey, Ethel Cain, Britney Spears, and general ones about the state of pop music right now. So I think we should just get straight into it. First, if you're not already subscribed to the Pop Pod, make sure you are. You can hit that subscribe button, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you're watching or listening. Also, if you are liking the Pop Pod and you do like what you have heard so far, if you haven't rated us 5 stars, that really helps with our visibility and I will be forever appreciative. This one's for you. If you want to come join the Discord and talk more about pop music, I will drop the details for that in the show notes down below. That is the housekeeping out of the way. Let's get into some of your spicy takes. The first one is, I do not like artists releasing alternate covers. Pick one cover and stick to it. This has obviously been a big one recently, and I've been noticing artists do this more and more, particularly with Sabrina Carpenter's Man's Best Friend and also Taylor Swift's The Life of a Showgirl. There have been so many alternate covers, and these albums haven't even come out yet. In the past, the way I remember it happening was that you would really get one cover, maybe 2 if you were lucky, and then there would potentially be another cover for the deluxe version of the album that would come later on. But at the moment, it feels like we're getting 5 or 6 covers before the album has even dropped. There is obviously an explanation for this, and that is that the covers are being used to sell vinyl variants or physical variants of the album and drive up the first week sales, not only the first week sales, but just the album's general sales and the capitalism of it all, for lack of a better phrase. It's been happening a lot recently with Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift is kind of the queen of it, and I know that a lot of you will give me backlash for that because she's not the only person doing it. We've seen it with many other pop artists over the past few years, but right now she's the most present force because she has, I think, already had 7 different covers of The Life of a Showgirl. The first thing I want to address is this obviously dilutes the power of the original album cover. Ariana Grande actually is one that did it, that pops to mind. She did it with Eternal Sunshine, giving us several different versions of that. But it means that the original cover, which is very important, not only in pop music, I think, but in music in general, because it's the image that really stands for what the album is. And when you think back through the most iconic covers in pop music, I'm thinking of Frank Ocean's Blonde really stands out to me. Lord's Melodrama really stands out to me. Madonna's Ray of Light. I mean, so many Madonna covers. And it's meant to stand as this symbol for what the album is, what the album sounds like, and what the album wants to represent. And the more covers you release, I think the more that it dilutes that power and just kind of steps on the art of an album cover in general, because it means that like fans are, it's up to them to choose the cover, which is fine. That's cool. But I think just generally, when we look back at an album, we think about that main cover that represents it, that one image that says everything about the album that we need to know. Katy Perry's Teenage Dream, another very good example. And when you put several ones, there's no image to stand for the album. And it just kind of feels like it makes it impossible for the album to have that iconic imagery that really, I guess, that stands as a visual representation of the album throughout history. So I think in terms of longevity, this is already not a good symbol for the album, and means that the confusion around what main cover stands for it means that it doesn't last as long in history as it would without it. If that makes sense to you. I know that's quite a convoluted way of saying it. The other thing on top of it is that this is just a way of selling more copies to fans. I already do not like this variant thing that's going on. I feel like Billboard needs to put rules in place so that artists can only release a certain amount of variants that count towards first week sales. I feel like they have done something recently to try and make up for this, but in doing this, and particularly in doing it in the way that Taylor Swift has rolled this out, whereby you get one variant every couple of weeks or every couple of days until the album drops, it means that it's difficult for fans to pick the actual variant that they want to buy in the end, because they're overcome by the FOMO of having to buy it each time it drops in case they miss out on their favorite one, because presumably these will not drop again. And it just, to me, kind of boils my blood, because it makes a mockery of the connection between artists and fans. I think a fan knows that an artist at points throughout their career is going to sell to them. That's very obvious. But I think that it needs to only go to a certain point where you should be able to trust the artist to give you the options straight up, and to know that you're not going to be left with several copies of this album that you potentially don't want all of them. And I know that it's up to the consumer to choose. I know that. But I just think that the consumer should be able to choose with all the options in front of them. So they're my main 2 points about this. I don't like that it dilutes the iconography of the album cover. And I also do not like the capitalism of it all, and fans having to buy multiple copies or feeling like they have to buy multiple copies because of FOMO. Next one, sticking with Taylor Swift, is that Taylor Swift wouldn't be as big as she is right now if it weren't for the pandemic, i.e. Folklore and Evermore. This is a very interesting way to look at this. Obviously, Taylor Swift is in her Imperial era. The Eras tour helped boost that. But I think that ultimately it starts with Evermore, because if you remember before Evermore, during the Lover era, things weren't quite as solidified as they are now. It felt like she could be knocked from her perch at any point. But from Evermore onwards, it's been pretty hard to deny that Taylor Swift is the biggest artist right now. Perhaps the biggest artist of all time. And I think that putting it down to the pandemic is interesting, because to do that suggests that people only started taking up Taylor Swift because they were bored, locked inside, or because she was bored, locked inside, and she made Folklore or Evermore. I think the real point is that Taylor Swift's success right now all stems back to what she did on Folklore, which is change her sound and do something different at a really pivotal moment in her career. And I think that's exactly what it comes down to, that people were getting tired of the Taylor Swift sound. And I do think that by Lover, we were on to the third kind of, or maybe even fourth iteration of a Taylor Swift pop album. And what Evermore did and Folklore was it told us that Taylor Swift could do more. She could make different sounds. She could write music in a different way. And because of that, I think it reinvigorated interest in her art. So I don't think that it's specifically because of the pandemic, but I do think that it was very important at that point for her to change her sound in some kind of way. And she did exactly that. And I think had she not done that, I don't know if she could have regained her footing on the top of the pop pyramid. So I feel like Evermore Folklore is a very important part of her career. The next one that I've got is Lana is one of the worst live performers in the game right now. We're obviously talking about Lana Del Rey. I have seen Lana Del Rey several times over the past couple years. I saw her in Mexico City at a stadium show. I saw her at Coachella, and then I saw her at Wembley Stadium. This is not an opinion I hold at all. I do think that Lana is a frustrating live performer. And I mean that purely based on the set list, because as somebody who's followed Lana for a long time, I can never guess where the set list is going. She never feels like she has to play her biggest songs. And she also never feels like she has to play the fan favorites. She makes a set list purely based on how she's feeling at the time. I think that the country set that she brought to the UK and Ireland was particularly bewildering, because that genre of music is definitely more US centric than it is UK or Ireland centric. And that's just an example of how she follows her artistic pulse almost recklessly. And I think that's why people say she is a boring or bad live performer. But in terms of what she offers, the songs that she does perform, I think she has become an extremely captivating performer. I think that her vocals each time I saw her were incredible. And particularly at the Coachella set, I feel like she's found a way to bring a grandiosity to her performances that she hasn't always been able to do, because her music is just not set up for her to be a stadium or a festival headline act. But I think that she's found this really nice middle ground where she's been able to bolster up her sets and still maintain her artistic integrity. And I say this particularly about songs like Did You Know There's a Tunnel Under Ocean Boulevard, which are not exactly giving festival or stadium, but the way that she bolsters it up with the choir or her backup singers and the performance that she gives there, I think is pretty moving, to be honest. And I found in the Wembley one, and I'm going to draw on that one because that's the last one I saw, I thought there were so many moving moments during that. And I feel like her way of bringing intimacy to that kind of setting is just really mind-boggling. And she's one of the only artists that's able to do it like that. And I think that you're not going to get an Eras Tour kind of performance from Lana Del Rey. You're never going to. And I think if that's what you're going to the show expecting, then that's why you're going to be let down and disappointed. But I do not think she's a bad performer at all. I actually think she's one of my favorites. The next one is also about Lana Del Rey. She has a beautiful voice, love her aesthetic, but Lana Del Rey is boring. I think if you think Lana Del Rey is boring, you may be tapped in around Born to Die and to more of her pop-leaning projects like Lust for Life and Honeymoon, and you perhaps find her balladry boring. And I've made this connection a few times recently, but for me, she more echoes the career of people like Joni Mitchell, who have stayed really steadfast to the fact that they are a singer-songwriter making music of a particular tempo, and they color that in different ways, but it doesn't change a phenomenal amount if you're just taking it at a surface level. Obviously, Joni Mitchell throughout her career got inspired by other things like experimental jazz, and she went into all different pockets, even country at times. And I feel like Lana Del Rey does that as well. Like when you think of Norman effing Rockwell, there's a surf rock aesthetic to it. And then you go to Did You Know There's a Tunnel Under Ocean Boulevard, and there's more of a gospel kind of church-leaning vibe to some of the songs. And then with this next album, or what is supposedly the next album, which is now called Stove, by the way. And she's going into more country tones. And I don't think that things shift seismically, but they shift enough to keep people interested. And also she's a storyteller, and each time she's giving different parts of her life in various different ways. And I think that that's a really cool thing to watch her do. So I understand if you're more of a pop fan and you're more into that Born to Die kind of thing, maybe what she's done recently has not been specifically for you. But I do think she does some exceptionally interesting things. You just need to be paying attention. So I do not think she's boring. Propaganda I'm not falling for. Role Model, the next pop boy. I like him, but I don't think he got it. This is an interesting one. If you listen to the podcast I did with Nikki at night, we talked about the main pop boy, and we were talking about acts like Somba, and also Role Model came up. Role Model is an interesting one because I don't think he satisfies the next main pop boy in the kind of way you would have thought about Justin Bieber or Harry Styles because they are these poster boys. I think that role model satisfies more of a next main pop boy in the kind of way that Billie Eilish and even Gracie Abrams are main pop girls. And I think that's just because things have changed. We expect less to idolize the people at the top and to feel like they're on another level that we just could never relate to. And we want them to kind of act as friends, as like buddies, as the boy next door. And I think in that way, that's what role model satisfies. And he's done a very good job at finding quite an authentic connection with his audience and on social media as well, as acting like almost a friend figure. And I also think that he brings that into the music with the kind of way that he tells stories. And Sally When the Wine Runs Out is a great example of that. And I feel like maybe if you've grown up in a generation like I have, of Justin Bieber being that kind of like model male pop star because he makes top tier pop hits and also is not really acting as your best friend, but somebody that you would like to look up to or somebody that you idolize. Role model is definitely not that. But I think in 2025, yes, he has a very good chance of being the next main pop boy. But I understand if you find that difficult to get your head around. The next one is this is another Taylor one, excited for Max, Shellback and Taylor, but I'm not tired of her Jack Antonoff and Aaron Dessner work. I'm also not super tired of it. But I think that in order to continue to progress as an artist, you sometimes need to shake things up. And I do think on the Tortured Poets department, particularly on some of the production on the first half, it was reminiscent of things that she'd done in the past, particularly with the way the vocals were treated, some of the songwriting tropes, also definitely the Jack Antonoff drums. And I do think that it was starting to get quite tired and quite predictable of what she was going to do. And in order for her to step into a new role and mark a new era of her career, I do think it was important for her to go to new collaborators or go back to old collaborators in the case of Martin and Shellback. And I do think she's clever in just completely barring Dessner and Antonoff from this project because it is going to force her to step out of her comfort zone and explore something different. And the main criticism of Taylor Swift over the past couple of years is that we're not seeing the progression. It's too much of the same. So an exact way to face that criticism head on is to find new producers and go into a different sound. And Martin and Shellback are going to force her into a sound that Antonoff and Dessner just wouldn't have forced her into because she was in her comfort zone doing that. And I think that there is some great work that can come from being in your comfort zone. But ultimately, at a certain point, you've got to change tacks and do something different. And I think that's exactly what she's going to do with The Life of a Showgirl. And I think that it was an extremely clever move to do that. The next one is, and I think this is the last Taylor Swift one, but Taylor's special edition albums feel like cheating the sales charts. This harks back to the question that we addressed at the start of the podcast. And yes, that's exactly what it's designed for. I do think that there's part of it about making like memorabilia for the fans, and the demand is there. So the fans want it. The fans want all these different iterations and merch and like the endless just string of things that she sells. But Taylor Swift is also in the game of pop music. She wants to be the best because she wouldn't have made a lot of the moves she's made over the past couple of years if she didn't want to see herself at the top and she didn't want to better her sales each time. Tortured Poets Department did 2.6 million sales in the US in its first week, which is just unheard of in 2025. And then we're going into an era that is a pop-leaning era that doesn't have the diaristic approach that Tortured Poets Department had. So she's going to be expecting to better that. And the way to do that is through variants and special editions. She knows that. 800,000 copies she did of Tortured Poets Department in the first week. She's going to better that with this album, and this is the way to do it. It's not something I agree with. It's not something that I feel like is ultimately that fair to fans who you know will buy every single thing you do, but it is going to get her the result that she wants. Sour is not nearly as good as Guts. Way too many ballads. This is something I wholeheartedly agree with. Guts is my favorite Olivia Rodrigo album, and I think for the very reason that it just has more guts to it. Sour feels slight in comparison, and it is mostly because of the ballads. There are a few ballads in the middle of the record that don't get me that much. And I think that when she brings the ballads into it on Guts, they just have so much more of a kick. I'm thinking of like Vampire, which just cuts through. Teenage Dream, is it Teenage Dream? Whatever the last track on the album is, that just cuts through as well. I just think that she does Making the Bed as well. The lyricism is just so much more cutting and so much more direct. And I think that comes with age and confidence. And I think for that reason, yeah, Guts is definitely the better record. And then couple that with the fact that it has these really raucous, crunchy rock moments on it. Bad Idea, right? Such a crazy single choice. So yeah, it's no question to me that Guts is the stronger record. The next one is Lana by SZA, should have been its own album. I'm on the fence about this one because I think that as an album, yeah, Lana is strong enough to be its own album. But I think the fact that SOS was still burning so bright, it was kind of clever to couple it with SOS and release it as a deluxe and shoot SOS a little further up the charts so that it could break some of the records that it's broken. I think that it's like one of the longest top 10 records by a female artist. I believe that's the record that it's broken. But at the same time, Lana by itself, with a whole new marketing campaign, like completely separating it from SOS, it still would have done exceptionally well. Here's where I think the worry is, and I know that SZA is like a classic overthinker and she really overthinks all of her releases, and I feel like she was worried that Lana didn't have the major moments that SOS had. The major moments being Good Days, Kill Bill, Nobody Gets Me, and then also, of course, Snooze too. There's just so much to live up to. And I feel like she almost chickened out and decided that making it a deluxe edition was lower stakes, which it is lower stakes. Nobody judges it on the same level. And I also don't think that Lana has those major singles on it outside of maybe Satin. There are so many songs that I love off Lana, and I think that it is a very good record. But I do think that it was kind of clever to position it like this and just test the waters and be like, hey, what do you think? Rather than being like, this is my new album, it's the follow-up to SOS, and have all this massive pressure on it. Now she's just been able to keep like coasting on the SOS wave. She's been on a stadium tour with Kendrick Lamar. She's headlined plenty of festivals. I still think that SOS is going strong enough for there to not be a completely new SZA era just yet. That said, I would like a different album. Another point on that is I don't think that Lana is enough of a different vibe to what SOS is. I think that sonically they are both on the same page, and I would like to see like a bit of a switch up when we move on to the next SZA album. Next one is Britney should not return with a new album. I mean, most Britney Spears fans surely would disagree with that because everybody wants to hear a new album from Britney Spears. I'm in two minds. One, because part of me is really intrigued to hear what she would do now, given that it's been several years since she's had an album and things have changed so much for her since the Free Britney movement, since getting out of the conservatorship. Everything that she's given us since that point has been pretty shit, to be honest. Like, we've had a single with will.i.am, and then we had the Elton John moment as well, and they are just not up to par with what she has given us in the past. So I would like to hear her do something that is a little more sonically interesting, and I do think that she has it in her, and I would love to hear that. I think that anybody would love to hear that and have this like celebratory Britney's back moment. On the other side of it, it's we don't deserve to have that Britney's back celebratory moment, and I think that a pop career has been so damaging to her mental health, her physical health, that she doesn't want to re-enter that kind of world. And I think that that is totally plausible because the last time she was doing this kind of pop work, she was doing it under duress and she didn't want to do it. We saw how much the Vegas residencies took a toll on her. We heard the lifelessness in some of the late Britney albums, not so much Glory, but Britney Jean certainly. And I think to go back into this world is to kind of almost agree with the treatment that she's been given along the way. And I don't think that she owes us a redemption story at all. I think that she owes herself peace. And if the most peace she can get is by not releasing music, then yeah, she shouldn't release another album, to be honest. But we'll wait and see what she's going to do. I honestly have no idea. I would not be able to put any amount of money on a bet that Britney will return with new music ever. I just do not know. She is more unpredictable than ever. But yeah, if she doesn't release a new album, I think that it's totally understandable. The next one's kind of funny. We should start torrenting music again. I don't know if it's nostalgic, the like Napster torrenting days for me, but it does like remind me of a very exciting time for music, but also obviously an extremely damaging one because the music industry was in absolute tatters as they were trying to figure out how they were ever going to make money again now that everybody was getting it for free. Now we've figured out now they have figured out how to make money again, obviously through streaming, but I think streaming is so detrimental to the artist. And while streaming fixed the problem for record labels, it didn't fix the problem for the artist necessarily because they're still essentially giving away their art for free. So yeah, maybe we do need to start downloading for free again and wait for another shakeup that falls more in the artist's favor than what streaming does. I don't know. I'm not sure if going back to illegal downloads is really the way, but if artists could find a way to control the narrative, then I would be down for whatever they want us to do. The next one is Crash would have been more popular of an album if it came after Brat. This is such an interesting one for me to consider because obviously Brat turned Charli into a mainstream pop star, but on Crash, she was cosplaying as a mainstream pop star. Crash's whole theory was, what if I take all the tools that the record label can give me, and what if I play this game like they want me to play it, like a proper mainstream pop star, and see what happens? And it didn't turn her into the mainstream pop star. I'm not even sure if she hoped for that. I think it was more just an interesting, like, we know how fascinated Charli is with the industry. I wouldn't be surprised if this was more out of her own fascination than anything else to see what happened. Obviously, she took like pitch songs from other artists. She gave a proper marketing campaign. She gave a full performance with dancers. And then crazily, the thing that turns her into this mainstream pop star is Brat, which is almost anti-pop in a way, in terms of the cover, in terms of the way she presented it live with just her on stage, the subject matter of some of the songs, the sonics of the songs that are more rooted in club and dance music than anything that was going on at the charts then. And I absolutely love that's what turned her into the star that I think that she was made to be. So yeah, it would be such an interesting practice to then, after this moment, after the Brat moment, have the mainstream pop album. I don't know if it would have, I think the expectations would have been so high that to come off an album like Brat and then play the mainstream pop game so explicitly, it may have almost come off as lame, I think, because it would have, whereas when she released it, she was an underdog pop star and it came off as like an interesting and analytical exercise in a way. It wouldn't come off the same now. It would come off as a genuine play for pop stardom and a genuine play to extend this run that Brat has given her. And it almost would be a sellout. I know that being a sellout was part of that era, but there was a humor and like a wink involved in that. Whereas I just don't think it would have that same sort of irony if she did it now. So I don't know if it would be. I think numbers wise, probably yes, just because Charli is a much bigger star. But I don't think that it would be the right move for her right now in this part of her career. But that's a really interesting one to consider. Next one is Ethel Cain is severely overrated and 8+ minutes of wailing does not make a masterpiece. it is true that 8+ minutes of wailing does not make a masterpiece. And I think that much of Ethel Cain's music is an exercise in patience. If you want to go back and listen to the episode I did on Ethel Cain, we talked about Ethel being kind of the ultimate punisher. She really makes her fans go through it with her. But I can understand if you don't appreciate that and you're a fan of more succinct work. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that that's totally fine. But there is some kind of journey that you have to go on with Ethel to achieve those moments of like, I don't know, to achieve the most emotionally maximal moments that are possible to achieve from an Ethel Cain work. You need to go through these elongated, drawn out, painful songs, because that is the story that Ethel Cain is telling. It's not necessarily one that has hope or optimism. And because of that, she portrays it in that exact way. She portrays hopelessness as this almost like barren land. And I also think that the 8 minutes of like sometimes just space is important for her to demonstrate the landscape that she's writing from, which is Middle America or the South. I just think that the whole tone and length of Ethel Cain work is very important to fully immerse yourself in the story that she's telling. I don't think that she's underrated, but I do think that there comes a point where her music can feel quite exhausting to people. And if that's the case, it's potentially just not for you. And I think that that's absolutely fine. I don't think that you have to like Ethel Cain, or I don't think that you should like Ethel Cain. In fact, I think that she's a divisive artist for a reason, but definitely not overrated in my opinion. That actually brings to an end the controversial opinions for today. I always love going through these. I would actually love for some of you to send in some voice notes with controversial opinions. If you want to hit the email address in the show notes, you can send one, or you can just jump into my DMs on Instagram and send me a voice note on there. I almost gave people my WhatsApp number the other day to do it, but then realized that that's maybe not the smartest decision. So I'm not going to be doing that. We have plenty of stuff coming up. I have teased a Madonna Ray of Light episode, and that still will be coming. If it's not this week, it will be next week, because it's actually quite a blockbuster week for pop music once again. On Friday, we will have the Sabrina Carpenter record Man's Best Friend to talk about. I will also react to that on YouTube if you want to watch the full reaction, but we will also talk about it on Bop or Flop as well. I'm actually recording several episodes this week of really fun stuff, some throwback roundtables with Bop or Flop elements included, and also some underrated artist segments as well. There is plenty more to get excited about. If you've got any episode ideas, feel free to shoot them through to me, DM or on email as well. But until next time, thank you so much for joining me. See you next time.